I have crossed many rivers. Herman Mack. Copyright 2012 by Herman Mack. This book is sold subject to the condition that it shall not, by way or otherwise, be lent, resold, hired out, or otherwise circulated without the publisher's prior consent in any form of binding or cover other than that in which it is published, and without a similar condition, including this condition being imposed on the subsequent publisher. The moral right of Herman Mack has been asserted. First published in the United States of America, 2012, by Herman Mack. Designed by Renee Flowers. I would like to thank my wife for working with me and enduring my bad moods and bad behavior. In addition, as a father, I would like to thank and apologize to my daughter and sons for the love they expressed to me during many years of bad behavior. I would like to thank Bruce Nemec for his assistance and his invitation to join Alcoholics Anonymous. I would like to thank Jerry Boehm for his help during this period. From all the negative things that happened to me, I have been able to motivate myself for a better life and move on in life past those issues. You must always remember, it is not always about you. It is not where you come from. It is where you are going in life with a positive attitude and doing it with love and passion to achieve success. I took that attitude and moved on. Today, I am a happy man with many things to be grateful for. A beautiful wife and loving family living comfortably in Palm Springs, California, and enjoying doing something I truly love, playing senior softball with a league that started in 1982. I am the only one remaining of the group that started 30 years ago. My sincere thanks go out to my sister-in-laws, Renee Flowers, for typing this book, and Allentine Robinson for encouraging me to write this book. I am writing this book to thank my family and friends for their support and love they have extended me through the years. There are many rivers and many stops in my crossings. I hope one of these stops may be recognized and someone can benefit from it. I have made some mistakes in life, but I believe I have profited from them in many ways. To understand your present, you must go back to your past. That is what life is all about. My past has not been perfect, but I strive to correct my life as much as possible. My number one goal in life is to respect others daily. This goal put me on the right path to a better life. We all have dreams, and they sometimes come true, but if there is no effort, they only remain dreams. My first problem was that I was an alcoholic, and no one could tell me I was. I was a bartender, and liquor was there for the customer and me. The customer would have one drink, and I would have one drink. I always shared the fun with the customers. One night, my boss was standing behind the bar, observing me drinking a few cocktails with the guest. He sent word for me to come to the office. I was a little nervous because I thought I had done something wrong. He told me to have a seat and said to me that he had noticed me drinking behind the bar. My first thought was that he was going to fire me. I would not have a job. He then asked me if I wanted to go to a meeting. I asked what kind of meeting. He said, AA meeting. The only AA I knew of was AAA Auto Club. My boss then explained to me that the purpose for these meetings was to help people who were problem drinkers. My first statement was, I am not a problem drinker. I just have a few drinks every now and then, which was all night. He smiled. I accepted the invitation. Going to meetings during this period, my boss worked with me, which was not an easy task, since there is very little anyone can do but warn you. It is a problem you must recognize, understand, and accept the fact you must work with on a daily basis. With the help of my wife and my boss, Bruce Nemec, I have not had a drink of any kind of alcohol since 1983 and counting. Contents 1. Growing up fast. 2. Learning life lessons. 3. The journey begins. 4. School training. 5. Off to St. Louis. 6. Show business. 7. Call to duty. 8. Tale of the Cock. 9. How I Met My Wife. 10. The Living Room in Los Angeles. 11. Palm Springs. 12. Orange Rum Freeze. 13. Red, Bob and Lonnie. 14. Palm Springs Senior Softball. 15. Retirement and Travels. 16. Donut Shop Crew, Family History. After Reconstruction, my parents' families moved from Forest, Mississippi, and settled in Arkansas. Both families had an ex-slave in the family. I remember my paternal great-grandmother, Mack, telling me about slavery as a girl and how she survived the hardships. Great-grandfather Rick, my mother's grandfather, was also a slave. He never liked to talk about it to me. I was very young. My grandfather would tell me I should think of something better. I was too young to understand what he meant. Now I know what he was feeling. The suffering he had endured during that period was too much for him to explain to me. He was afraid of how I would react to it. He was a very lovable man with a beautiful smile and happy disposition. Great-grandfather Rick was 102 years old in 1937. Those that did not receive land became sharecroppers. My grandfather said they claimed they rented land from the white landowners, but that was not true because they had little money, so that was impossible. He said white people knew freed slaves would not work on a plantation in gang groups, so they became sharecroppers. A sharecropper was a tenant farmer. They would work on a percentage basis for a property owner who would furnish them with an empty house. If needed, he would give them farm tools, a mule, seeds to plant the crop, clothes, and food. At the end of the year, the tenanted farmer and the property owner would divide the profit. Crops often failed because the sharecroppers had very little education or knowledge of farming. Still, they were required to pay for their housing, farm tools, and board. Not having other options, the farmers signed on for this impossible existence year after year. Moreover, since the landowner also owned the store where you bought seed and supplies, it was nearly impossible to get out of his debt. Chapter 1. Growing Up Fast. I was born in 1931 to Zora and Frank Mack in Hankins, Arkansas, a little area consisting of one general store about 50 miles from Pine Bluff, Arkansas. My father decided to move to the city of Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where he had a job offer at the cotton plant. He worked as a forklift driver, transferring bales of cotton from the warehouse to rail cars for shipment to customers for weaving material. When my little brother was born, we had a very good and happy household. My paternal grandmother, Florence, lived in Detroit, Michigan. She would send us boxes of clothing. My brother and I would have a very good Christmas with plenty of toys. When Dorothy, my baby sister, was born the next year, my father started to stay away from home. He would not come home from work, and he gambled every week. There was no money to pay the bills. We did not have bread in the house, and the rent was behind. Every week on payday, my mother would send me to my father's job to get money. We moved every other week. The furniture people were on my mother about payment. They did not want the furniture back. The furniture was worn out. When my father would return home, my parents would fight, and my father would leave again. I do not know what we would have done if it was not for my Uncle Ardle, my mother's brother. He would give my mother money whenever he was home. He also had a family to support. Those times were very hard. My mother had 4 brothers and 1 sister, and they helped as much as they could. The nation was in a depression. My mother gave us love and care after being treated so badly by my father. My mother worked very hard washing and ironing by the week to feed us and keep a roof over our heads. She spent their time with my baby sister when she was not working. My brother and I just roamed all over town. We did not get in trouble. We would visit our grandmother and our uncle's house to get a meal. Sometimes my mother would bring home scraps of food from where she did day work. Many nights we went to bed hungry, but I must say we survived. Things deteriorated. I've crossed many rivers. 13. My mother had enough, fighting and arguing with my father about taking care of our family, and she decided to leave. For many years, I did not know why she left and got a divorce. After my mother left my father, he did not know what to do with us. My dad moved us in with his cousin, who lived in an area called the Brick Yard. His cousin owned a little nightclub in the front of his house that opened only on the weekends. For 6 weeks we lived there, sleeping on the floor after the nightclub closed. My father was to pay for our food. Sometimes he did not pay. Our cousin fed us anyway. My mother decided to move to St. Louis, Missouri, and take my brother and little sister with her. My maternal grandmother lived nearby, and her brother was in town. My mother had not seen her uncle Albert Ensley for 20 years. He had recently been released from prison. He was married with 4 children and was renting 60 acres that he was farming, located about 100 miles east of Pine Bluff, Arkansas, in a little town named Gould. He said he had married a woman with 4 children and we would be a good addition to the family. My mother and uncle decided that I and my brother would go live with my uncle June 1937. My mother left for St. Louis on Friday, and Saturday my brother and I went to live with my uncle. We did not know anything about our uncle. All we knew was he was my mother's uncle and that she had not seen him in 20 years. When we arrived, we were introduced to his stepdaughters. He introduced us and explained we would be a part of the family. After 2 days, his wife returned with another daughter and son. He sat us all together and told us he had been in prison for 14 years for killing a man. I thought to myself, what a lucky man to survive in prison for murder in Arkansas in the 1920s. Uncle said he became a trustee over prisoners while he was there. I did not figure out his motive for his long story for many weeks. He was conditioning us for some of the same treatment that the prisoners received while he was a trustee. I must say, he was a determined man. He let us know what he expected of us. He said everyone had a job to do, and if it were not done the way he wanted it, you would suffer the consequences. Right there, I knew I had become a prisoner. We never went hungry. We always had plenty of food. We raised most of our food in the garden and slaughtered all our meat every year. The only thing we bought from the store was sugar and flour. We had a special time to get up in the morning. First duties were to feed the horses, mules, chickens, pigs, and cows. Next, we would go to the field. It all depended on the time of the year, planting season or harvest season. We went to town once a year to take our cotton to the gin and sell our cantaloupes and watermelons. We each received $1 to spend any way we wanted. We could go to the movie that was there every summer, housed in a tent. A rope divided whites on one side, blacks on the other side, so you would not be mixed up. We went to school in an old church once owned by white people. The school consisted of grades 1 through 12. There were 3 rooms and 3 teachers. Grades 1 through 4 in one room. The principal taught high school. The other 2 teachers taught the lower grades. There were 6 students in high school. The only sport in the school was basketball. They played 2 to 3 ball games a year. Our gym was the high school classroom. They would clear the seats out to make room. The ceiling was high, so it was okay to play. We went to school in the winter when the weather was bad and we were unable to work in the fields. School was about 5 miles and we had to get up early so we would not be late. When it would rain, we would walk on the side of the highway. The school bus with white school children would pass you and splash water and mud on us and call us names. The children on the bus laughed at us. My uncle would farm us out to pick cotton for other farmers who were behind and needed to get their cotton to the gin. He always collected the money. That was the last we would see of that money, and we were not allowed to say anything about it. Yes, we got food and clothing, but we were treated as sharecroppers with no pay. Our only outlet was to go to church every Sunday. I would cry every Sunday because I had to go to Sunday school and sit on the front seat. About 10 of us kids sitting there after Sunday school would get a break and go to the candy store next door to the church. We would return to church to listen to Reverend Mills, who was usually drunk. You could smell the alcohol. It was so bad you could hardly breathe. My father came down to visit my brother and me. He really came because my uncle's daughter came with him, and they took lots of vegetables and meat back with them. He did not give us a dime, which I did not expect him to. I had not seen my father for 2 years. I knew I had to make a change, but I did not know how I would include my little brother. My uncle was a very dangerous man. He threatened his wife with a shotgun and a few of the neighbors. They were afraid of him. The next Sunday morning we were getting ready for Sunday school. I looked over at my uncle who was in bed asleep from gambling all night. I went to his pocket, opened his wallet, and took a $10 bill. I went up on the highway and flagged down the first Greyhound bus I saw. The driver stopped, and as I approached, he asked me where I was going. I said, to Pine Bluff. He asked where my parents were. I said they were in Pine Bluff. The bus stopped on the city limits. My aunt lived not far away. I went to her house. While I was there, my father came by. I explained to him why I left. I was very sad that I left behind my baby brother. My father took me to live with him. He had remarried. His wife did not like it much, my being there. About a month later, my uncle brought my little brother to Pine Bluff to my aunt's house. He told my aunt my brother cried every day and he was so broken-hearted. My uncle also left a message for my father that if he ever sees him, he would kill him. Our stepmother treated my brother badly. She beat my brother with a stick. We had words. When my father came home from work, he told me I had to leave. I was 9 years old. My little brother and I returned to my father's sister, Aunt Layla's house. She was the sweetest woman I have ever known. My mother came in town about a week later. She took my little brother with her to St. Louis. My mother said she would not be able to take me. This was another sad time in my life, but I got over it. My Aunt Layla and Uncle Joe were good to me. I stayed there, about a month. My Uncle Joe told my dad there was not much room in the house with his mother there, and he had to make some plans for me. Chapter 2. Learning Life Lessons. In those days, Pine Bluff, Arkansas was thoroughly segregated. There were separate water fountains, toilets, restaurants, and bus and train stations. If you wanted food, you got it from a small window with no thank you. No courtesy was given. I remember having parades twice a year. The black high school band and college band had to go to the rear of the parade to march. If you purchased clothing from the department store in town, you were not allowed to try on clothing for a fitting. You had to buy the clothes as is. If you purchased shoes, a string measured your foot. You could never try them on. There was one public high school in town for black people, Merrill High School. Arkansas AM&N College had a high school on the campus. You had to pay a fee, which most families could not afford. As a small child, I loved baseball. The town was very small in those days. Most black people lived not too far from each other. The baseball park was very close to my neighborhood. The Pine Bluff Judges was a minor league team playing there. Sometimes I did not have the 10 cents for admission to the games. I would see someone I knew and they would pay my way in. They had a section for black people on the third base side and benches that seated about 30 people. These benches had no cover overhead to shield you from sunshine or rain. White people sat in the grandstands. When the team traveled, they would rent the park out to the Negro League teams, the Kansas Monarchs, the Memphis Red Sox, the Birmingham Barron, and the St. Louis Stars. There was a team in town named the Pine Bluff Black Cats, which was sponsored by a man who owned a restaurant named Black Cat. His team was not on the level of any of the teams mentioned. They would play these teams. I do not remember them ever winning a game against these talented players such as Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige, and Papa Bell. They had a first baseman named Goose Tatum who used a glove 3 times the size of a first base mitt and long shoes which were very flat at the toe. When he caught the ball, he would flap his feet on the base. This man was not only a great baseball player, he was also exciting. He was the crown prince of the Harlem Globetrotters basketball team at the same time. I would sometime be the bat boy for most of the clubs. I would get into the game free. Those games were always packed with black and white people with the rope between them. There was never a problem. Thanks to Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson, today baseball has no color line. Black people would come in town from the farm areas or on weekends to shop and enjoy mingling with other people. They would dance and have a beer. But sometimes there were arguments or fights. There was one black policeman on the force. His name was Lustache. He was feared by most black people. They were the only ones he was allowed to police. He was mean to black people and killed many black people in some cases for no good reason. Every weekend someone was beaten or killed by him. The only way he knew to discuss anything was with brutality. If a black person was killed, there was never an investigation. If you went to jail, you were convicted and served time. Petty offenses would get you more time than you deserved. That was the Southern way. There was one grade school and one high school. We never had new books. We always got the torn, ragged, and, without a back, books from the white schools. I must admit, we had a very good teacher who was willing to help. If you showed the desire to learn, they were very strict. They would whip you if you were unruly and sent a note home to your parents explaining why. Sometimes you would get another whipping at home. I got my share of whippings, more than I needed. I believe it made me a better person and to respect my elders at all times. Chapter 3. The journey begins. Around this time, a carnival was in town, and the grounds were adjacent to my aunt's house. I went there looking for work and met Bill Williams, who owned 3 concession tents. I got the job of putting them up. He stated he could use someone like me permanently, but he would have to have my parents' consent. The name of the carnival was Dodson World Fair, housed in Jacksonville, Florida. I took my father over to meet Bill. My father gave his consent for me to leave with the carnival. I was 8 years old. To this day, I think my father was glad to get rid of me. This was the beginning of my journey of crossing many rivers. We traveled by a special train, since there were lots of heavy equipment and animals to transport. My first stop was Alton, Illinois for 3 weeks. By that time, I had a chance to meet most of the people that would play a large part in my life as a carny. Bill Smith, the security chief for the carnival, protected me my entire stay with the show. That life taught me the ropes of life. There were some who didn't care for black people, but Bill kept them in their place. No one bothered me at any time. Every 3 weeks, we moved to another city. We would be on the road for about 5 months. In each city, I had 3 small tents to put up that housed the milk bottles that were very hard to knock over. They were made of lead. There was a special way to stack them. Another tent was the cat rack, which was a betting game to put up money to knock the cat off the rack or knock them down or throw the ball through them. There was a board behind them that you adjusted for each bet. The boss saved my money for me. He also gave me money for food each week. I spent the entire summer with the show. In September, that last stop was Grand Island, Nebraska. We were to return to winter quarters in Jacksonville, Florida. My boss kept me on salary. I packed dolls and statues in boxes to get ready for the next season. My boss would take me out to dinner every week as a treat to show his appreciation for the job I was doing. I slept on the grounds, but my boss had a trailer on the grounds he used when we were on the road. He had a home in Jacksonville that he stayed in, so I had the trailer for my use. In January, we made our first trip to Key West, Florida for 3 weeks, and from there to New Orleans. I had very little to do at night, so Bill, the security chief, told me to deliver small bottles of liquor to clients that worked in the carnival, and he would give me a cut of the take. The age guesser left the show, so my boss contacted a former employee from Boston named Tony, who joined us in Beloit, Wisconsin, introduced me to Tony, and Tony set up a deal with me to stock his tent every day by putting the statues and dolls for prizes to be given on the shelf for him. Every week, Tony would buy me something to wear. He was very good to me. Next, we went to Jackson, Mississippi for 3 weeks. The weather changed and it was getting hot. We would go north to Gary, Indiana for 3 weeks. I told my boss that I had enough. I felt like I wanted to go to school. He said he hated to lose me. I was 10 years old, July 1941. He paid me the $800 he saved for me. Chapter 4. School Training. I went to the Greyhound bus station in Gary, Indiana, and purchased a ticket to Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I rode the bus for 3 days. When I arrived, I called my father's job. He had been transferred in the city as a courier for Cotton, B&H Cotton Company, delivering samples of cotton to different buyers. I finally found him. He was not very glad to see me. He took me again to my Aunt Layla's house. He said to her that he did not know what to do with me. In the meantime, while they were discussing me, my grandfather showed up. All agreed my grandfather would take me to live with him in Pine Bluff. I left with my grandfather, who lived about 6 miles from town. Upon my arrival at his home, I met his wife, Eudora Lockhart Mack. She was a wonderful lady. She was such a grand lady. She was the architect of my life. She was a teacher of a small school that she enrolled me in. I was 10 years old and had been out of school for 2 years. My grandparents owned a small mom-and-pop store. My duties were to get wood in the house for the night, feed the hogs and chickens, and work in the store. This I liked very much. Eudora would work with me on my homework. To tell you the truth, I was very dumb. I remember we were on fractions and she asked me what was 1/2. I said I did not know. I repeatedly said I did not know. She went into the store and picked up an apple. She asked me what it was. I said it is an apple. She said what part of the apple. I said I did not know. That is when the fun began. Each time she asked me, she would pop me on the hand. She explained to me about the parts of the apple. She said 1/2, 1/4, and 1/4. She cut the parts from the apple and laid them on the table. Eudora was a loving parent and instrumental in my learning abilities. That involvement in my life I will always miss and love. I recall when I was in the 3rd grade and the teacher told me to read from a book. She said I mispronounced a word which I know I did not. I questioned her. That is something I should not have done. She called my grandmother. I don't have to tell you what happened to me. I never received a whipping without explanation. The reason, she said, was to never question a teacher. The teacher is always right. Just accept it and move on. Her words were, just listen to your teacher and learn. I also got my whipping. My grandfather was a very mild-mannered man. He never raised his voice. Sometimes you thought you could get away with things you knew were wrong. He would always call you on it. I would always get a whipping. I stayed with my grandparents for about 2 years. My parenting skills came from them. When I arrived in their home, I was a runaway child with no discipline. They gave me the best they had to give. My mind was made up to go into life in the dark, which was a mistake in crossing many rivers. I ran across many obstacles in life. After finishing the 6th grade in her school, she had a lady friend that she went to school with, who was principal of a grade school named the Training School, on the campus of Arkansas State AM&N College, which is now Arkansas State at Pine Bluff. She talked to her and got me in school. I stayed in school until 1945. I departed to St. Louis in 1945 after World War II to a nightmare of World War III. Chapter 5. Off to St. Louis. Had a problem adjusting to certain rules that were demanded of me. I would not listen to my grandfather, who was a stern man. My grandfather decided I should return to my mother in St. Louis, who I had not seen since 1937. My paternal grandfather worked for the Cotton Belt Railroad, so I didn't have to pay train fare. I arrived in St. Louis the next day about noon. I went to my mother's address but could not find it. There was a pool room on the corner of 16th and Franklin. I was told she was in the area. I asked a man in the pool room if he knew my mother. He said he knew my brother and that he should be there in a couple of hours. The man took my suitcase and told me to have a seat. I sat there about an hour before my brother came in. I greeted my brother. I was so glad to see him. He said our mother was at work and would not be home until later in the evening. They lived upstairs over the pool room. My brother took me upstairs to where I would stay. It was a 1-bedroom apartment with a kitchen but no bathroom. They were not doing well. They did not have a radio. My mother and her husband slept on a bed. The mattress underneath was pulled out at night for my brother and sister to sleep on. That night, all 3 of us slept on the mattress. The next morning when my mother went to work, I bought a newspaper to look for a job. I had $3 in my pocket. I found an ad for a pin setter at a bowling alley. I didn't know my way around the city, but I got on the streetcar and I asked the conductor directions to the area of the bowling alley, which was located on Kings Highway and Arsenal Street in North St. Louis. The conductor called my stop and gave me directions to the building. At the counter in the bowling alley, a gentleman asked me if he could help me. I told him I was looking for work. He asked me had I set pins before. I replied, no. He explained that it was a pretty strenuous job, but they would teach me. This was about 9:30 in the morning, and they had an 11:30 league to bowl. He took me to the back of the alleys where some fellows who were pin setters were. He introduced me to them and I said I wanted to learn to set pins. I will never forget the fellow who spoke up and said, I will be glad to teach him. His name was Everett Hearn. That day he taught me how to set pins. This was in July 1945. We became very good friends and shared lots of good times together. I worked that night and earned $9. Some of the fellows stayed in a room in the back where they had bunk beds and a washroom. The alley stayed open all night. They were very busy. I returned home the next day and told my mother I had a job and I would not be home most of the time. I told her it would be better and more convenient for me to stay on the job so they would not be overcrowded at home. My mother agreed. I worked the entire summer. I went to see my mother every week and helped as much as I could. I saved my money. I planned to go to high school. I wanted decent clothes. It all worked out well. In January 1946, I enrolled in Washington Tech High School. I kept my job. The boss gave me extra work. I would come in after school and fill the beer boxes and clean the bar. I made enough money for my mother to get a larger place. She moved to Vanderventer and West Bell to a 3-bedroom apartment. At night, I didn't have to set any more pins. My new job was icing up the beer. We had 3 leagues a night. Some of the people didn't own balls. They would reserve house balls to use in the league. I would get them in and put them on a rack, clean them up, and have them ready for use. They would pay me so much for the service. I worked there my freshman year in high school. Chapter 6. Show Business. The next year, I met a couple of students, Louis Times and John Smith, who worked at a nightclub as waiters. The name of the club was Club Riviera. Louis informed me that there was an opening, and he would take me to inquire about it. The job was to serve the waiters and waitresses ice, soda, and water. I went to work every evening after school filling the ice bins, bringing up soda, and made sure there were plenty of pitchers and glasses and ice bowls. The club seated 600 people. At the end of the night, all the waiters would tip me. The waiter's job was to wash all the glasses, bowls, and pitchers. They never wanted to wash them, so they would pay me to do it for them. After 2 shows a night, I would get home some mornings very late. I had to go to school the next morning. I didn't live very far away from the club. The owner of the club was a gentleman by the name of Jordan Chambers, a famous politician who controlled the voting power in all wards in the city of St. Louis. Anyone running for office in the state had to come to him for support. He also held the office of Chief Deputy Constable for the city of St. Louis. All the deputies who worked out of his office were handpicked. Because of segregation, all the black policemen went through him. At one time, the city of St. Louis had more black commanders than any other city, and City Hall was run by his political machine. At night, off-duty policemen worked in the nightclub as bouncers to keep the peace. On Thursdays, they would change shows, and the new show would rehearse the bands and dancers to get ready for the next week's show. The headliner's dressing room was next to my storeroom. Some of the headliners I met was Paul Gonzalez, Ray Nance, Olivette Miller, Louis Jordan, Ruth Brown, Red Fox, Slappy White, Lester Young, and Charlie Parker. I had the pleasure of meeting most of the great musicians and other greats in the entertainment field. To name a few, Louis Armstrong, Coleman Hawkins, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, George Shearing, Billie Holiday, Dinah Washington, and others. I left home and started living at the Atlas Hotel on Del Mar Boulevard. At that time, there was only 3 hotels in town that housed black people. One hotel was the West End Waiters on Vandervender Boulevard, the Atlas Hotel, and the Midtown Hotel. The Midtown was the best of the 3. It had the Glass Bar, a beautiful bar where they featured jazz every week. Stars like Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Ramsey Lewis, and many more performed there. All the entertainers lived in the Midtown or the Atlas Hotel. As my years progressed, I made many friends in the show business world. Some of them gave me advice on many occasions. Another gentleman by the name of Paul Gonzalez, a member of the Duke Ellington's band, I met in St. Louis and I had the pleasure of working with on many occasions, had something nice to say about everybody. I met Sonny Till, the leader of the Orioles, and he asked me to work for him. My first job was at the Regal Theater in Chicago for 1 week with the Duke Ellington Band, booked by McKee Fitzhugh, a Chicago disc jockey. After the show at the Regal, we would go by the Club de Lisa on Garfield Boulevard and State Street in Chicago. Red Saunders was the house band. He was married to Viola Kemp, a contortionist. The Club de Lisa featured the same entertainment the Regal did. In the early 1950s, most of the big bands broke up. Most of the leaders were working with trios and sextets to cut down on the payroll. There were bands that never split up, like Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Charlie Ventura. In 1949, the Orioles were booked in New York at the famous Apollo with Buddy Johnson and featuring Ella Johnson, his sister, and Arthur Prysock for a week. We did a lot of one-night stands. We had to drive from one gig to another. There were 2 cars. It was not easy sighting for hours in those days. There was little money to be made. We usually got booked on Mother's Day weekend. That would be the week welfare checks were mailed. We would get a good crowd. We were booked in Beloit, Wisconsin. When I arrived there, I had papers waiting for me to report for the draft. This was in 1952. Chapter 7. Call to Dut. When I returned home, before I did anything else, I went by the Club Riviera, where I previously worked. My friend Ruth Brown was appearing for the weekend. Over the years, her brother Leonard and I had become friends. He sometimes traveled with her, and to my surprise, he also had his papers. He said he had to go home to Blackstone, Virginia. I had to report on Monday to the St. Louis County Courthouse for examination. After that, I was sworn in with about 60 more guys. We were to go home to give our goodbyes to family and friends, then report the next morning to take buses to Camp Crowder in Springfield, Missouri. After reporting the next day, we arrived at Camp Crowder that evening and were assigned to barracks and issued bedding for the night. The next morning, we assembled in groups to be processed with our papers and assignments to units throughout the country. Most of the soldiers were from my neighborhood in St. Louis, off 10th Street. I lived on 16th Street, so we bonded together. After we were given our assignments, most of us were going to Camp Chaffee in Arkansas. The fellows from 10th Street did not want to go to Arkansas. They had a friend who was a master sergeant in the administration and told him they wanted to go somewhere else. The next morning, our papers came and we were to leave for California. The guys from 10th Street were Italians. There were only 3 black men enlistees. We were told we had to leave that night for Camp Roberts in San Miguel, California by plane. We all got ready to leave for this airport. After getting to the airport, we were told the plane was out of order. We could not leave, so the sergeant suggested that we go into the city or go to the movies or anywhere else we would like to go. Some of the guys went to the movies. About 15 of us went to a bar. The sergeant went with us. We had a 4-hour layover. When we arrived at the bar, the sergeant went to the owner, an old one-eyed, one-leg man, and explained to him why we were there in the city and that we had the consent of the chief of police. So everybody ordered a drink. When the bartender got to me, he said they did not serve blacks. One of the Italian guys took his hand and knocked over all the drinks, and we all walked out. As we were walking back to the bus, Tiny, one of the Italians, ran back and threw a brick through the window of the bar. We all ran back to where the bus was parked. When the police arrived, the sergeant stated what had happened and what our orders were. The incident was discussed for about an hour. Finally, we were able to leave for the airport. After arriving at the airport, the plane was still not ready. We stayed on the bus about 2 hours before we finally departed. We arrived at Camp Roberts about 8 o'clock in the evening. The next morning, we were taken to the parade field of Camp Roberts, the largest parade field in the Army. We unloaded our belongings and were told to line up in twos. We were told to run about 4 miles to our barracks. That's when I knew I was no longer at home. After arriving at the barracks, we were issued our bedding. Each of us was taught how to make a bed. You were also issued clothing, shoes, fatigues, underwear, cap, and socks. We were told to line up for lunch. After lunch, each person was processed for basic training, then put in units. Each unit was in a different barrack. At that time, the Korean War was going strong. Everybody was given 8 weeks training and then shipped out. Some went overseas. Some were assigned to different camps or forts in the States. Some went to medical training and some groups for advanced training. In about 4 days, we started basic training, which started out easy. We were taught how to march, the chain of commands, positions, and how to stand in rank. It got tougher as the weeks went on. I finished basic training in 8 weeks, and after that, each soldier was interviewed for job placements. After my interview, I was placed in the hospital unit since I was working on pre-med courses. They sent me to school for 6 weeks medical training. The training was short and the Army way. The faster the training, the quicker you were sent to the front. I settled in at Camp Roberts Hospital and would have some weekends off, as they stated I would be there for some time. My father lived in Los Angeles, so I called him and said where I was stationed. I had not seen him in 8 years. One weekend, he drove up to Camp Roberts to see me and got permission from my unit commander to pick me up for the weekend. It was a pleasant visit. In my unit, there were 2 guys that I had become very close to, Charles Johnson and Otha Chapman. Johnson was from Los Angeles and Chapman was from St. Louis. They asked if my dad would mind if they could ride down to LA with me. He agreed. We left Camp Roberts on Saturday around noon and returned Monday morning for revelry, which is 5 o'clock a.m. I must say, our first trip was a painful ride. Before we left that Saturday, we had received shots in both arms and the rear. It was such a long ride. When we arrived in Los Angeles, we really did not feel very good and didn't feel like going anywhere, but we forced ourselves to go. My father took us over to Central Avenue, which was crowded with people everywhere. The Dunbar Hotel was going very strong with entertainment, such as Johnny Otis and Little Esther Phillips. There were lots of nightclubs on Central Avenue, such as the Downbeat with Joe Liggins and the Honey Drippers, Club Alabama, Club Memo, and The Last Word. I named Central Avenue the Harlem of California, where music was played every night. Every Friday, white people from Hollywood would come over to enjoy the entertainment. The music was so good. There was a saxophone player called Big J McNeely. He had people following behind. He was a great hymn going around the block. He was a great musician. While I was at Camp Roberts, my friends and I would come down to Los Angeles and enjoy the music whenever we had time off. I was stationed at Camp Roberts about 9 months. I was then transferred to Fort Lewis, Washington, where I went to school for more medical training. I was discharged in January 1955. I returned to St. Louis in 1955 and worked at McDonnell Aircraft. I met a young lady and married her. The marriage did not work out, mostly because of me. I was drinking and was very jealous and demanding. I hung around St. Louis for a while, working many jobs as a waiter and bartender. 1962, I decided to change towns, and I moved from St. Louis to Los Angeles, a day after the assignation of President John Kennedy. A friend of mine set up a job interview at the Tail of the Cock restaurant. Chapter 8. Tail of the Cock. I arrived in California on a Monday in 1963 and went to my father's house Tuesday morning and then went for my job interview at the Tail of the Cock restaurant. On my arrival, I asked to see Johnson, who was a waiter there. Johnson was from St. Louis. After lunch, I introduced myself to Johnson and told him a friend sent me to see him. Johnson told me I had to see the head waiter. The head waiter came in after lunch, and I introduced myself and told him I was looking for employment. His name was Bolden. He said he had an opening in the San Fernando Valley. He would train me there for a few days. I accepted the job and trained there for 3 days. The next Monday, I reported to the Valley Tail of the Cock. The head waiter, Emerald Merrill, explained the rules he expected me to follow. He introduced me to the staff, and to my surprise, there were some men I knew from St. Louis, such as Ivory Finier and Charles Cree. Merrill took me into the kitchen to learn the operation of the restaurant. He explained the broiler, pantry, and what dish to serve with each item. They also had a method that was mandatory in the dining room. If a guest was seated at a table at your station or your co-workers and you are not busy, you must wait on that guest. This was called get the guests started by serving them a party cocktail. After serving him a cocktail, move the salt shaker to the corner of the table with a drink check visible for the waiter to see. This method of service began in the 1940s. This was a very upscale restaurant. After a few months, I learned many things about service in the business. It was a very pleasant job. I liked it very much. Later, I learned that the owner of the restaurant was named McHenry. McHenry hired his waiters from the Super Chief Pullman train cars. His head waiter, Mr. Brewster, was a Pullman train waiter. During my stay there, I had the pleasure of serving a lot of famous people. One was Bobby Troup, a pianist who was married to Julie London, singer and actress. We would talk music all the time. Some days after lunch, when the restaurant was not too busy, Bobby would bring his twin babies down, and I would watch them so Bobby could take care of a business matter. When he returned, we would discuss the old bands that I worked with in the 40s and 50s, such as Charlie Ventura, George Shearing, Count Basie, Clark Terry, Theo Monk, Miles Davis. Monk was one of his favorites. He loved to talk about him. I would tell him I hoped he didn't pull tricks like Monk. What a great talent Monk had, but wasted it on drugs in the end. Monk would show up late or they had to go and find him. After they would find him, they sat him at the piano. He would play an entire set with his hat and coat on and get up and leave. That was Monk. My working at the Tail of the Cock restaurant was a very interesting job. On weekends, we would work late. Most of the waiters didn't have cars, so they would ride together. When they finished work, we would get together. The first thing they would do is stop at the liquor store and get a fifth of liquor. They always took the shortcut through Coldwater Canyon. It was very dark and dangerous with winding hills. We were very lucky. We were never stopped by the police. By the time we reached Beverly Hills, some of the guys would be drunk and fighting each other and using foul language. This went on for months. I saved my money, and one of the waiters had a car for sale. I purchased it for $90. Good thing I did. About 2 months later, the men I rode with had a bad accident, and some were hurt badly. These guys had strange personalities. Most of them were from Texas, and they did not mind letting you know it. I would sit and listen to the stories they would tell about home and the things they went through. For instance, they could only go the dentist on Wednesday. If you needed dental work before Wednesday, you had to wait and suffer the pain. You could only go to a doctor on Thursday. I remember a waiter got very angry with me because I never about Juneteenth Day. This is a day they celebrate in Texas as a holiday, which was similar to the 4th of July. They became very angry and said to me that I didn't know about when the slaves were freed. He said that was the day they celebrated. I accepted it as was said and never questioned it. I didn't get along with some of these people. They were jealous of me because the head waiter and I became friends. There was one waiter always picking on me and tried to confuse me as I worked, and I tried very hard to stay away from him. One Saturday, the head waiter called me on my off day at a bar I was drinking at and asked me to come in. He said he needed me badly. The restaurant was packed. He wanted me to serve drinks, and when the business was slow, I could leave. I rushed to the job. They were very busy. I started serving drinks to the patrons. About an hour into the evening, it was almost over. The waiter whom I had problems with approached me and took money out of my tip tray. I asked him to please return the money. He refused and knocked the tray out of my hand. Before I knew it, I hit him and knocked him down and returned the money to the guest. I was told to finish my shift and report to the big boss on Monday. I told my story using words which meant nothing to him, and I was let go. That was the end of my employment at the Tail of the Cock. The next day, I went up the street on Ventura Boulevard to a restaurant called the Wild Goose to seek employment. I met the Bob White, the owner, who introduced me to the head waiter. I introduced myself and stated I was looking for employment as a waiter. He asked me where I worked before. I told him I just left the Tail of the Cock and my reason for leaving. He said he was very familiar with the incident and the person was on drugs. He said he had a job opening 4 days a week in banquets. I accepted the job. This job turned out to be the most interesting job I ever had in the food service business. It was gourmet service, top of the line. We would serve approximately 100 people with 5 to 6 appetizers, wine with each appetizer, dinner, and dessert. We also served after-dinner drinks, usually cognac. The crew I worked with was a few waiters I had worked with before from St. Louis, Paige Taylor, Badfoot Smitty. They were a jolly group that had fun all the time. We enjoyed each other and worked in harmony. I stayed with the Wild Goose until they closed for good. Chapter 9. How I Met My Wife. During this time, I was working at the Bill of Fare nightclub in the Crenshaw area on Buckingham Road as a bartender. The club was owned by Willie Smith, an accountant who had a thriving business. The club had good entertainment such as Louis Jordan of Caledonia fame, Irene Reed, Hada Brooks, famed singer and pianist. They also had a steel band on weekends. There was another entertainer every famous in Los Angeles, a female impersonator from New Orleans. His name was Sir Lady Java. One evening I decided to go to a dance with some friends at one of the clubs on La Cienega Boulevard in Los Angeles. She was there with her friends. I was introduced to her by my friend, Little Terry. I asked her was she married, and she told me she was divorced and was the mother of 4. We talked the rest of the evening. Since I had 2 left feet, I did not know how to dance. I asked her out again. She refused. Before the night was over, she gave me her phone number. I called her twice, but no response. About a week later, I called her again. She finally decided I was not going to give up, so she accepted. 2 years later, we were married in 1969. We have been together since then, through all the turns in my life. I must say we worked it out to be a really happy ending, with love and happiness. Chapter 10. The living room in Los Angeles. I was told in St. Louis that everyone from there had a stopping place in Los Angeles called the living room. That was one of my first stops. To my surprise, there were numbers of people I knew. This club was owned by a gentleman by the name of Duke. He was from Buffalo, New York. My father dropped me off, and I waited around until everybody was off from work. All the guys started to come in, and to my surprise, the first person I saw was a childhood friend of mine, Lionel Genius from Aldine Avenue in St. Louis. He was better known as Radio. He acquired that name because he was very argumentative, but all in fun. There was nothing Radio did not know something about. Just ask him what jockey won the Derby in 1903. He would give you a name, most of the time, the wrong one. He did not know himself and get a laugh. Ask Radio anything about racehorses, which was his game. He would give you an answer, whether or not he knew the correct answer. Radio had an older gentleman friend, Benny Bush, who was a racehorse nut. Radio and Benny would discuss horses all the time. The living room was quite a place with many friends and lots of fun. If there was anything someone could help you with, they were willing to help. There was always someone there. The living room parking lot was where you could get your car fixed, no matter what was wrong with it. Just see the mechanic, Gerald. He was better known as Dirty Harry. He would fix your car between drinks or in a few days. He was a nice guy, but never was on time. He would always put you off until later. We all played golf and softball together. We had lots of fun. We spent a lot of time at the Cork, a bar on Adams Boulevard. Many friends would go from one bar to the other. If you were from St. Louis or Chicago, there was always someone there you knew, or someone knew the person or persons you were looking for. For many years, the old guys enjoyed stopping by to visit each bar to see old friends and talk about old times such as Sam Townsend, Pat Murphy, Claude DeBow, Pee Wee Jenkins, Billy Hunter, Top Logan, Al Chappelle, Johnny Maxwell, Ronald Townsend of the Fifth Dimensions, Eddie Moore, Lionel Genius, and Chubby. There was also Big Bill, Turkey Neck. Yes, we called him that. His real name was Ed Sanders, Victor Jones, Earl Garner, the famous pianist, and Bill Davis. All are deceased and will be missed from the living room days. I would like to mention a few friends: Ralph Williams, Corky Everett Bell, Ward Wesley, also known as Mr. Hollywood, and Lonnie Jones. The precious gift of their friendship matters so much to me today. The living room will always remain a beautiful part of my life. Chapter 11. Palm Springs. A friend of mine told me about a job he was going to in Palm Springs, California, at a restaurant called Hamburger Hamlet. He said he would refer me. He said he would return in a couple of weeks and let me know. He returned in about a week and told me to come on down to Palm Springs. He would hold the job for me as a waiter. I left for Palm Springs on Sunday, January 1973. I went directly to the restaurant. My friend Al Gregg introduced me to the manager, and he asked me if I could start on Monday. I didn't have a place to live. To my surprise, there were a number of people I knew there, and they said it would not be a problem. They would take care of it. I accepted the job. My schedule was Monday through Friday. The first week I worked, I was approached about a job on Saturday at the tennis club opening night. I applied for the job as a waiter and was hired for the job. They wanted everyone to wear a tuxedo. I did not have one and refused to rent one for one night. The manager said it would be all right. When I arrived, the waiters were put in teams. One waiter worked the floor and one worked the kitchen. The head waiter explained the menu. There were tables of 30 people. The appetizer was served first. A Caesar salad was to be made at the table. They assigned me a waiter to work with me. Since I didn't have on a tuxedo, I agreed to work the kitchen. His job was to make the Caesar salad and serve cocktails. I informed him to let me know when to fire the food. I helped him with the cocktails and waited for him to take food orders and give me the checks to fire the food. I fired the food when it was ready. I went to the dining room to inform my waiter that the food would be out in 5 minutes. I asked him had the salad been served. He said to me he didn't know how to make a Caesar salad. There I was with all this food cooked on the warmer and nowhere to serve it. I left the food on the warmer and rushed out to make the Caesar salads. After serving the salads and picking up the plates, I rushed in to get the food. To my surprise, he didn't know how to carry a tray. As a matter of fact, no one could carry a tray. I delivered all the food to the tables. As the tux waiter was walking around being important, I finished the night. This was opening night at the tennis club, which happened every year and my last year to work there. I went back Tuesday to receive my tip and salary, and to my surprise, the head waiter thanked me very much and gave me a $50 tip. I asked what the tip was for. He tried to explain to me about waiters who had added money on credit cards to the guests' checks. I asked him what that had to do with me. He said everybody had to have some money. I explained to him the money was not acceptable, and I expected more for all the work I had done. He asked me would I work the next weekend. I told him no. I was finished working at the tennis club. I continued my work at Hamburger Hamlet, which was not a bad job, and the people I worked with were easy to work with and helpful in all ways. To mention a few, Freddie, Joyce, and Dee Dee were very helpful to me. One night I went into the lounge of the Riviera Hotel seeking work as a bartender. The bar manager said there was not anything open, but check back with him at a later date. I did check back about 3 weeks later. He hired me as a banquet bartender. At that time, the hotel was very busy. I left the hamlet and started to work for the Riviera Hotel. I worked as a banquet bartender full scale. Finally, an opening came up in the main bar where they had entertainment every night featuring the Navarro Band and his sister, who was the singer. On Sundays, they had an amateur hour, which was lots of fun. All the locals would show up and made it a great day. This went on for some time. The owner of the Riviera Hotel, Mr. Schulman, hired Al Anthony, a music director, to hire all the entertainment. That is when the hotel began to bring in top entertainment, such as Tony Bennett and many more. Jane Russell appeared, a compete show each week. They brought in shows from Chicago, featuring a Billie Holiday look-alike and many more, which was very good. The shows lasted about 2 years. Every Monday was big band night with the Ace Huskin Band, which drew all the locals plus the guests in the hotel at that time. The hotel catered to lots of groups. The largest group the hotel ever had was a group called Magic Badger and Coca-Cola. They took the hotel for 1 month and all the surrounding areas to install tents. The Bob Hope Classic Ball was hosted for 12 years in the ballroom. Each year a different headliner like Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis, Flip Wilson, Barbara McNair, and all the stars would come out. It was quite a gala affair. Of course, Bob Hope was a tough act to follow. We also had a group named the Single Swingers every 4th of July weekend. They came into the hotel and almost destroyed the hotel, but the business was so good, they hated to lose them. They took pictures of some of the acts and some of the people sued the hotel. That ended the singles group. In the 80s, the old man decided to change face and the name of the hotel to the Riviera Hilton. People thought the hotel was sold. This was not true. The hotel was still owned by Mr. Schulman. He used their Hilton name and products. The name remained the same until his death, and the hotel was sold to a group from Dubai who owned only one hotel in Dubai. They came in and changed management. They did business about 2 years. They started renovations, but had to stop. They were waiting for $17 million in funding from Dubai, which never arrived. The hotel went into receivership, and we had a week to vacate the property, and we would get a letter if money was owed to anyone. At that time, I applied for work at the Hyatt Grand Champion in Indian Wells, California, where the big tennis matches were held. A friend of mine was the food and beverage manager there. He hired me, and I went to work in a small bar and restaurant called Charlie's. The bar was named after Charlie Passerall, who was the tennis director. It was a very interesting place. I met all the tennis pros and celebrities at that time. I met Billie Jean King, who was the queen of professional women's tennis. She was a beautiful lady, so kind and friendly. I worked there for a year. The Riviera was in receivership, and the Radisson Hotel picked it up and tried to make a go of it. They did not want a union, so a picket line was formed around the building. They finally settled the strike. The hotel was up and running for about a year and then went into receivership. The Carpenters Union picked it up and the hotel became union again. I took a job at a country club called Ironwood. I worked with a lady by the name of Virginia. She was very knowledgeable about food and beverages. A job opened at the Riviera again, and I returned as a bartender. Some of my old friends were still there, and some of the same business returned each year, mostly union business such as UA, teachers, iron workers, teamsters, immigration, city workers, longshoremen, and many more. I will miss the many friends I had while working at the Riviera. Chapter 12. Orange Rum Freeze. In 1980, the Hotel, Restaurant, and Employees Union gave a mixology contest to determine which bartender could mix the best cocktails. There were several different contests, with waiters and waitresses carrying trays of champagne without spilling the drinks. I won from Palm Springs, California as bartender for the best drink. The name of my drink was Orange Rum Freeze. My recipe is rum, orange juice, orange curacao, orange flower water blend, served in a cocktail glass, decorated with orange slices and a cherry. This contest was held at Paul D'Amico Restaurant in Palm Springs, California. After I won, Mr. Schulman, the owner of the Riviera, called me to his office and gave me $500 as spending money in New York. The prize for the winners was a trip to the finals in New York City at the Sheraton Center Hotel and the Tavern on the Green. For the finals, every union house in the United States and Puerto Rico was represented. There were 4 contestants from Palm Springs flying to New York. The hotel there was very busy as the Democratic Convention was in town at Madison Square Garden. President Jimmy Carter, Julian Bond, Jesse Jackson, and Coretta King were in the same hotel for 1 week. The hotel gave us a banquet and dance. The next night I went to the theater and saw Sugar Babies with Mickey Rooney and Ann Miller. On Sunday, the finals were held at the Tavern on the Green in Central Park. I did not win first place, but came in 3rd out of 100 contestants and was giving a cash prize. A bartender from Chicago won the award for Best Cocktail. I had the pleasure of taking a boat ride on the Hudson River around the Statue of Liberty. That same day, we went to Harlem to visit the location of the old Teresa Hotel. I had very good memories of that hotel. Mr. Brown was the manager. His son was Ron Brown, the Commerce Secretary in the Clinton administration. When I traveled there with the Orioles, we stayed there while performing at the Apollo Theater in the late 40s. Ron was a child running around getting autographs from the clients in the hotel. In those days, New York was the top of the line in show business. A lot of jazz groups such as Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, and many more were appearing at different nightclubs throughout the city such as Downbeat, Birdland, the Three Deuces, and the Royal Roost. Most of the bebop groups were playing the clubs in the late 40s before I left the road. Chapter 13. Red, Bob, and Lonnie. While working at the Riviera during the summer months, business was very slow. In my spare time, I would visit the merchants that stayed open downtown. One time, I spent a lot of time with Red Skelton. He owned a small art store in the Desert Fashion Plaza. I would stop by and listen to him and watch him paint. Sometimes he was serious. I knew he missed being able to entertain. He would bring up incidents when he was on stage, but he was still a happy man. I know there was never a funnier man than Red. He had such a good heart and a beautiful relationship with children. There will never be another Red Skelton. I watched him paint his clowns and joke about his beautiful brushstrokes with that funny laugh. That was one of the memorable times in Palm Springs. I will never be able to stop thinking about them. I almost forgot about my friend, Bob Hope. Sometimes Bob wanted to get out and about the city, and he would have his chauffeur bring him down to the Riviera bar. We had a couch in the dark corner of the bar, and Bob Hope would listen to the music of the pianist Joe Zaghi for about an hour, and no one knew he was there but me and his chauffeur. The chauffeur would let me know he was there in the corner when he would pick up a couple bottles of water from the bar. He would then return and sit with Bob until they left. Bob would always wave on his way out. During the Bob Hope Classic Golf Tournament, Danny Thomas and his wife would come to the bar. Sometimes she would sing with the Sonny Navarro House Band. Business in Palm Springs was very good in the 70s, and the city was a fun place to visit. Some of the restaurants and clubs were the Jack London, the Signature Room, Paul D'Amico's, Larry Perino's, the Canyon Hotel, the Tennis Club, and the Racquet Club. These were just a few of the hotels and restaurants that were very busy. My friend Lonnie Miles owned a shoeshine parlor where all the fellows gathered. Leo Durocher and many more of the celebrities went there for his service. Mr. John Johnson of Johnson Publishing and Ebony Magazine used his service. There was a very long line to get into Louise's restaurant. The restaurant was famous for her pies. It was very busy every day. Chapter 14. Palm Springs Senior Softball in 1982. I saw some fellows in the park playing softball. I approached a gentleman by the name of Soul. He explained that they were forming a senior softball league for seniors. He asked me my age. I told him I was 50 years old. He said I was too young. The starting age was 55 and older. He said it would be all right to practice with the team. So I practiced every day with the group. Finally, he organized the team, but did not have enough players, so he dropped the age limit to 50. We started to get more players. Most of the players were not very good. The Palm Springs ladies won the national championship in 1983. He made arrangements for us to play them to get us in shape. We got in shape, but every game we played with them, they beat us badly. Opening day was a big day for senior softball. We opened our league on Sunday in Palm Springs Angel Stadium and played there a number of years. We had 4 teams to start, and by the end of the year, there were more teams. Finally, Saul thought we were ready to challenge and play tournament ball. At that time, Las Vegas was having tournaments, so we entered our first. It didn't turn out very good. The team did not win a game, but each year we returned, and finally, we won some games. Senior softball started to take off everywhere, and today, senior softball in Palm Springs is a highlight of our city. Thanks to Saul and Vicky, this is my 30th year and loving it. I am the only original player left still playing. I think it's something every senior should try. It gives me something to do and pass time. I enjoy it. If you are 50 years old and older, you are welcome. We practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays. There are teams in every city and Canada. When we first started, Sol wanted us to play night ball under the lights, but no one could see the ball, so he had to cancel night games and play days only. It was funny because we did not play well in daylight either. When we played at night, the ball was hitting the older men in the head. Today, we have 16 teams in the American League and National League. We have players who come down every year from Washington, Oregon, and Canada that make up our very successful league. Chapter 15. Retirement and Travels. Since I retired, I have been traveling quite regularly. One of my key countries was Panama. Traveling the canal and seeing the unique operation of major trade routes throughout the world. How this route saves hundreds of miles going from one continent to another. This is a very effective movement of trade and goods throughout the world. Having visited a lot of countries in the Caribbean, I learned a lot about their culture and the way they live. In some cases, not very well. Most of them have no industry and depend on the tourist trade to survive. But you would be surprised to find how proud some of these people are and how they stand up for their country even in bad times. When going on tours, we found the best way to travel in the city is to hire a taxi and let him take you to places of interest you will be able to see. The best and most informal areas, they drop you off and wait for you instead of you paying a fee for the tour. It's about the same amount of money, but you get more out of it. Better explanations, and at a more leisurely pace. Another one of our most recent excursions was to Europe. In 2010, our traveling companions were my sister-in-law, Sandra Moore, and her husband Marlon, our cousins, Clifton Rogers, and his wife Leotha. This was a 12-day cruise, starting in Barcelona, Spain. One of my favorite places was Venice, Italy. I found Venice was one of the most interesting places to visit. In St. Mark's Square, we visited the Doge's Palace. At one time, this was the seat of their government. It was something to learn about the way it was set up, the size of the government housed in a small place. I learned that every Doge, a duke, was selected from a rich family who owned land and was selected at an early age. There were about 23 Doges. They ran the city's finances and the courts. All meetings and court cases were held there. The jail was adjacent of the palace. When the prisoner was taken to jail, he had to cross a bridge to get to the other building. The name of the bridge is the Bridge of Sights because it has little peepholes so you can look out, this being the last time you can see outside. The jail was very secure with bars made into the concrete. They had only one person to escape in history, and that was Casanova. He was never captured. It must have been an inside job. The Doge's Palace was one of the grandest buildings in that century, with its golden staircase and the Mouth of Truth, where if you had a complaint or accused someone of anything, you would drop a slip of paper inside the mouth. They were picked up and brought up before the Doge and is then investigated. The golden staircase to the palace was used for propaganda, designed to impress visitors. Its 24-carat gilded ceiling staircase was something for them to write home about. In order to see the Doge, you had to have a big title or pay a bribe and bring a gift. Nothing has changed in seeing dignitaries. The Doge's palace housed some of the greatest paintings of that era. The Doge's family lived in the palace. Venice is a beautiful city made of churches, museums, and landmarks. It was a city for the rich, a powerful empire. They governed themselves, and it became the most powerful area in Europe. They considered their government to be the most stable in the world. As the story goes, most of their riches were taken by Nero to Rome, and Constantine took the plunder to this new capital in Constantinople. The Christians stole it back and took it to St. Mark's in Venice, to the Basilica, where St. Mark is buried and where it is today. We took the lower Corniche road into Monaco from Cannes, France. The day we arrived in Cannes, they were having a boat race. These were some of the largest yachts in the world. Some were there to show and to be sold. The largest yacht there was owned by a Saudi prince, not for sale. Another was owned by the Onassis family. It was for rent for about $300 per month. We drove by the Carlton Theatre in Nice, where the Cannes Film Festivals is held in May every year. Also located in Nice is the Negresco Hotel. Out in front of the hotel is a statue of Miles Davis as a tribute to him for appearing there so long. He made lots of friends while in France before moving back to New York. The lower Corniche road was very narrow and stood along the beautiful coast. When we finally reached Monaco, our first stop was the castle on top of the rock. We watched the changing of the guards each hour. Before we reached the castle, we passed the Rainier daughters' houses. Early that day, the prince waved from the balcony. We also found out he was engaged to be married, and since then he has married. Before we completed our visit, we entered the church where Prince Rainier and Princess Grace were married, and then buried. All of the Grimalkin princes were buried in this church. After leaving the church, we visited the museum and the Monte Carlo Casino. It was a very interesting place to visit. The city and state is a very small area with a small population. The people here pay no taxes. Most are affluent. The government is constantly building upwards because the sea is on one side and the mountains are on the other side. It is a very small country wedged between France and Italy. Another of our excursions was the city of Pompeii. We went through the town of Sorrento. Pompeii is located about 12 miles from Naples. We did a walking tour of the ruins. Before the volcano erupted in Pompeii, the people were very prosperous and wealthy after leaving Rome to escape the turmoil there. They had their own government lavish houses, bathhouses, temples, theaters, beautiful paintings and frescoes. In 79 AD, the city was located at the foot of Mount Vesuvius. One night, as the people slept, Mount Vesuvius erupted and buried the town under 20 feet of ash and pumice stone. On display are loaves of bread and bodies as they were caught during the volcano. There should be seen to really understand. The disturbing thing about this tour is this mountain is still alive and smoking. Later, we arrived by bus in Rome. We first visited Vatican City, which is the smallest country in the world. We visited the courtyard of St. Peter's Square, where people were in long lines to visit St. Peter's Basilica in the museum. It was impossible to enter since we were on a schedule. Thus, we intend to return on our own one day. We did see the window where the Pope gives his blessings to the public. He was not in that day. He was visiting England, meeting with different church dignitaries from different faiths. Afterwards, we visited the Colosseum, the Arch of Constantine, most of the Roman ruins, and the famous Spanish Steps. We also visited the square where Mussolini gave most of his speeches. I'm sure they will keep the ruins in good repair. Scaffolding was everywhere. Tourism is the #1 industry in Rome. Chapter 16. Donut Shop Crew. Our friendships grew after a group of us started meeting every morning at the donut shop. We discuss the problems of the day, the problems of the world, never finding a solution to any one of them, but have formed friendships that have lasted through the years. The first one I will mention is Joe Ross, whom I worked with at the Riviera Hotel in the 70s. He was chef there for a number of years. He is from Germany. Joe was raised in the Black Forest on a farm. As a young man, he went to school to become a chef and took a job on a ship for a while. He worked his way to Canada. In a hotel there during that time, a job opening in New York City came up, and he was accepted. After leaving New York, Joe started working at the Riviera in Palm Springs. Joe Casey, now deceased, was a very lovable man whose family was as warm as he was. Joe liked to tease, to make you believe he was the toughest man in the universe. He was a very good businessman. He always had a smile. He and his wife operated a tuxedo shop and wedding chapel for many years. He is missed. West Williams, a Palm Springs icon, knows many in the city and was manager of Sambo's Eatery. He was also an entrepreneur selling coffee for Farmer Brothers. He is retired and living in Palm Springs and enjoying his grandchildren. Jack Simpson, deceased, was a retired salesman. He was a member of the group for many years and loved by all. He played softball with me in the 80s. We had a little joke. We used to tell about Jack. A fly ball was hit to him and the ball fell right into his glove and he missed it. I said to him, "Jack, you should have caught that ball." He looked at me and said, "I am not Ty Cobb." We laughed about that for years. He loved his family, and his grandson was the love of his life. Jack will also be missed. Ken Black is from Canada. He has been a member of our group for about 10 to 12 years. He retired from the transportation department in Vancouver. We get the news from Canada about their government and his projects and way of life. He and his wife come each year for about 4 months. After that, we check with each other by phone to see how they are health-wise and anything we can be helpful with. Another true friend, Remo, from the Philippines, arrived in Palm Springs in the 70s. He went to work for Palm Springs High School for 35 years and retired. We are very close. We call and check on each other's welfare every day. If someone misses coming in, we have to know why. They didn't come in. That's how we keep up with each other. Another friend was Jim McGuire, deceased. He was a very dedicated leader of our group. He was a sort of referee, looking at all sides of a problem. We had many things to share as friends. He also will be missed by all of us. He was a retired state worker of California and was a resident of Palm Springs. He was a loving family man who cherished his grandson. Ernie is another friend from the Philippines. He also is a retired chef. Ernie retired to open his own convalescent home with his wife and sons. They are doing well. We are all enjoying our retirement in sunny Palm Springs, where the old folks come to visit their parents. Note: photographs are in the e-book. The author is now smiling. The end.